Welcome to Ready Steady Charge, and thank you for joining us for part 2 of our Seattle trip. If you haven't seen how we travel 1,200 kilometers in the Kona Electric from Calgary to Seattle, please watch part 1. In part 2, we want to give you our top 9 rules of EV road trips that you will definitely want to follow. Let's get started! After spending a night in Tacoma, we traveled to Olympic National Park through Port Angeles. It is a long trip, and we are starting with only 75% battery. How are we going to know if we can make it? This brings us to rule number 1. Plan your route better with a better route planner. A better route planner is a very useful app to use as a reference when planning long trips in an EV. This app takes into account numerous environmental, terrain, and vehicle-specific factors to give you the best plan. It will let you know where you should charge, how far you need to drive between chargers, and the predicted consumption. We find that it isn't 100% accurate all the time, but it is accurate enough most of the time. If you are experienced in EV driving, you may make your own calculations based on your predicted consumption. We actually have a video here to take you through the calculations. We find that it's always better to use a better route planner as a sanity check when planning our road trip. So for this trip, we made our own calculations after looking at a better route planner, and we know that we should be just fine. Our first stop after arriving in Port Angeles is the Olympic National Park Visitor Center. We arrived with 37% after 175 kilometers of driving. We plan to go up the mountain via Hurricane Ridge Road and do some hiking starting at Switchback Trailhead. The distance from the Visitor Center to the trailhead was only 24 kilometers. That really doesn't sound like a lot, does it? Surely the Kona can go 24 kilometers on 37% battery. But what you need to understand is while driving those 24 kilometers, those short 24 kilometers, there is a 1,200 meter elevation gain. It is a big climb. Oh, here she comes. Rule number 2. Watch out, boy, for cold wind and climb. She's a range eater. Alright, before going into unfamiliar territories, you should know what your vehicle's consumption is like at different speeds, weather, and terrain. Under extreme conditions, you need to adjust your predicted range to match those conditions. If in doubt, always charge more than you need. Climbing this mountain dropped our state of charge from 37% down to 20%. Now that's a lot of energy used for 24 kilometers. But the upside is, when we go downhill, we will get some energy back through regen. We went hiking up the mountain from Switchback Trailhead. The mountains were covered in clouds and there was plenty of wildlife to see. We even found snow on the mountain in the middle of July. It really feels like we're back in Canada. After hiking, we drove back down the mountain and headed west. At the foot of the mountain, we had 25% battery, so we actually gained 5% battery through regen. Our next stop is Lake Crescent Lodge, where we can do a short hike to Mary Mare Falls. The lodge luckily has 2 level 2 chargers, and we thought it would be a good idea to plug in while we go hiking. But how do we know whether those chargers are occupied? This brings us to rule number 3. You and your Plugshare make a perfect pair. Almost all DC fast chargers are networked, and some level 2 chargers are also networked. This means you can check their status remotely through an app. Plugshare is the app of choice to learn all sorts of information about chargers. From checking the status of a charger to user ratings of the charger, Plugshare is extremely helpful for an EV driver. In our scenario, the level 2 charger at Lake Crescent Lodge are networked, and we saw that one is occupied and one is free, so we headed directly to the chargers upon arriving with 15% battery. We went off hiking and charged opportunistically at the same time. We visited the lake. and then went on to hike to the waterfall. We spent around 2 hours here. Once we came back, the charger boosted the Kona to around 35% battery. It is now evening time, and we need to make our way to our hotel. But first, we charged at Electrify America in Port Angeles. Conveniently, we could also shop for groceries at Walmart while the Kona charged. Once we finished shopping, the Kona was back up to 80%. It is late and time to head to our hotel, but that's actually not where the charging ends for today. At our hotel in Seacon Bay, there is a convenient 120-volt outlet for us to use overnight. Let's bring out rule number 4. Free juice is good juice. What we are doing is destination charging. If you have your EV parked for many hours overnight, why not plug it in when you're not using it? Charging from a 120-volt outlet is level 1 charging, and in North America, it has a maximum of 1.8 kilowatts. It is slow, and for the Kona, you can charge around 2% per hour. But depending on how many hours you're parked, it could charge a lot overnight. If you have any doubts about using the outlets, make sure you ask the property owner for permission. There are also many hotels with level 2 chargers, and they will fully charge most EVs overnight. Day 2's journey is an ambitious one. We are heading to multiple spots on the western side of Olympic National Park, and frankly, it's a charging desert. There are only a few scattered level 2 chargers and no DC fast chargers. This is gonna take precise planning, which is where rule number 5 comes in. It's not the size of your battery, it's how you use it. What we are talking about is how to be energy efficient when you drive. For an EV, the slower and the gentler you drive, the further you can go. If you want to learn more about how to drive in the most efficient way, we made a video about that. For our trip, we are going to be driving on mostly 90 km per hour roads or even slower. The slower speed will allow us to go a lot further compared to highways that are 110 km per hour. Plus, we are driving in warm summer weather, which is ideal for an EV. On top of that, we can plug in where we park as much as possible. The first stop of the day is Sol Duke, where we plan to go hiking to Sol Duke Falls. It is 100 kilometers away from Seacon Bay, and we started with 90% battery. When we arrived, we are at 70% battery. The Sol Duke Hot Spring Resort has 2 level 2 chargers, and we decided to plug in while we are away, because of rule number 6, ABC, always be charging. Like the famous Tesla Bjorn says, whenever you are parked, if you can plug in, plug in. This will reduce or eliminate dedicated charging time during your trip. You need to go to the bathroom or go stretch your legs for 15 minutes? Well, go plug into a DC fast charger. You are parked for a few hours? Well, plug into a level 1 or a level 2. Since we plan to spend around 3 hours in Sol Duke, the Kona will likely be close to fully charged once we start driving again. This will make our ambitious day of driving much easier. Here comes the Jetsons. We rode the e-bikes for 3 kilometers up to the trailhead for Sol Duke Falls. We locked our bikes and did some hiking. When we finished hiking, we rode the e-bikes back to the Kona lickety-split. Honestly, 3 kilometers on an e-bike didn't feel far at all. By the time we packed up the Jetsons, the Kona was at 94%. Now we know for sure there's enough juice for the rest of the day. The next stop is the Whole Rainforest, which is 115 kilometers away from Sol Duke. We did some hiking, we watched some wildlife, and true to its name, it is a rainforest, and it reminds me of places much closer to the equator. We continued on our trip and headed westward for the coast for another 75 kilometers through the town of Forks to the first beach. The view is breathtaking, and there's something calming about watching the waves lapping against the shore. And what comes after uno? Dos. Time to head to the second beach. To reach this beach, you need to do a bit of hiking, but man is it worth it. On top of the breathtaking views, the sand is so soft. It is extremely scenic, and there are weddings happening here. We really wish we could spend more time here, but unfortunately, it is getting late and we need to start heading back. If you come to Olympic National Park, this second beach is really worth visiting. We drove 115 kilometers back to the Electrify America station in Port Angeles, arriving with 35% battery. Like the previous day, we shopped while we charged. And why do we always charge at the end of the day instead of, say, the next morning? It's kinda getting late already. And that's because of rule number 7, charge it when it's hot. The ideal battery temperature for DC fast charging is different for each vehicle. For the Kona, that ideal temperature is 25 degrees. After a long day of summer temperature and continuous driving, the battery is above 25 degrees. This means the battery will charge at the fastest possible speed. This could be different if we allow the battery to cool off overnight and then try to fast charge it in the morning. Even if daytime temperatures are around, let's say, 30 degrees Celsius, nighttime temperature could drop well below 20. The battery might cool down below the ideal temperature the next morning, and this is especially true for the wintertime. After arriving at our hotel, we promptly followed rule number 4 again and kept topping up the Kona overnight with level 1 charging. Day 3 started swimmingly for the Kona. After overnight level 1 charging, it had reached 100%. Our drive today is not that long and we won't have to charge until we arrive at our hotel in the evening. The first stop is Port Townsend, which is only 45 kilometers away from Seacon Bay. This town has many historical sites and lots of old naval forts. We explored the town on the Jetson e-bikes, and the town was quite bike-friendly and has good ocean views. If you decide to go deeper into the forts, you can create a horror film with found footage. And don't worry, there are no jump scares. After leaving Port Townsend, we headed to Seattle to the Museum of Flight. But first, an unplanned detour. What happened was, when using Google Maps to navigate, I failed to set the navigation to avoid ferries. Without paying much attention, we went the wrong way and arrived at the Bainbridge Island Ferry Terminal. Shamefully, we had to do a 3-point turn and go back the way we came. Which brings me to rule number 8. Plans may flounder, always have buffer. This detour was not detrimental to our plans, since we are not driving that far today. But imagine if it happened on a tighter battery budget. In your planning, always leave some extra energy as a buffer. For the Kona Electric, 10 to 15% buffer should be adequate in the summertime, and 15 to 20% should be fine for the wintertime. Finally, we arrived at the Museum of Flight in Seattle after 215 kilometers. Both John and I are tech enthusiasts and military enthusiasts, and we both really want to come here. There are so many wonderful displays of air and spacecrafts. and we both felt like children in a candy store. And what do you know, they even have an EV on display. Sadly, we only had around 3 hours before the museum closed for that day. You absolutely need at least half to a whole day to experience this place fully. I would like to come back here someday. After the museum, we had dinner and arrived at our hotel in Tukwila with 43% battery. This hotel is within walking distance to the Tukwila Sounder Station, which has ChargePoint Level 2 chargers. These chargers are great for those of you who are economically minded. You pay $2 per charging session. So it doesn't matter how much energy you pull from the charger, each session is $2. Naturally, we left it to charge overnight, and like rule number 6, and also Tesla Bjorn says, ABC, always be charging. Day 4 is when we get to explore downtown Seattle. The Kona was 100% charged, so we did not have to charge in Seattle for the entire day. But what if we had to? What if we really needed to charge in a big city like Seattle? What is the charging infrastructure like? Seattle is full of chargers, and there are lots of DC fast chargers as well as level 2 chargers. But that's only the story on the surface. The truth is a little more complex. Introducing rule number 9. Fragmented charging stations are. If you drive a Tesla and rely only on their supercharger and destination charger network, it is as simple as plug and play. For those of us who are not privileged to bathe in Lord Elon's glorious light, we need to contend with a fragmented charging network. Here is a list of all the apps we have prepared for use in both Canada and the US. Some apps can work for multiple networks, but it is better to be like a Pokemon master and catch them all. A lot of these chargers have credit card readers as well, but many are not 100% reliable. What we would recommend is that you download all the apps ahead of time and enter your credit card information into them so that they are ready to be used. Some apps may require you to put money into it as well. We don't think that is necessary unless you know you are going to be using that app for sure. An added layer of complexity for international travelers is that if you do not have a roaming or data plan and have no other means of accessing the internet, apps are going to be as useless as the CCS is for the Nissan Leaf. So always keep that in mind. After some significant traffic jam, we arrived in downtown Seattle. We found a place to park and explore the area on our e-bikes. We toured a lot of places, and we first went to the Klondike Museum. Then we went to Kerry Park, where we rode up a huge hill to get some awesome views of the city. The next stop is Pike Place Market, where we visited the world's first Starbucks. The line to get in was pretty long, and of course, souvenirs are a must. For lunch, we had clam chowder on the seaside while being stared down by a gang of seagulls. And finally, we went to the Seattle Underground tour. The e-bikes were a great way to explore the city and avoid all the heavy traffic and parking. By the end of the day, both e-bikes were fully drained by the steep hills of the city. And hey, we saw a Rivian R1T, which is a little extra treat. After a whole day in Seattle, we packed up our Jetsons and headed north to Bellingham. We will stay the night there and begin our trip to Calgary the next day. In Bellingham, the hotel has level 2 chargers and they are free, guaranteeing 100% data charge the next morning. Like rule number 4 says, free juice is good juice. That concludes our 4 days trip following our essential rules when road tripping in an EV. We came out to the coast, we got together, and had a few laughs. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more electric vehicle content. We are Solomon and John, and we will see you on the next one.